It's really beautiful little things that go on that just show you what the base integrity of the group is. An example is if someone is going to prison on a specific day, what that person will do is at the Monday meeting before, they'll put their phone number in the chat. And then while they are driving to report to prison, they'll get 30 or 40 texts from people in the support group just wishing them luck or praying for them.
Well,
And
yeah.
where else does that happen? At a time when you could definitely feel like less than person or other people will other you. Imagine getting texts from people who love you and care about you in bulk, in mass. So that's the kind of life that we've chosen and the kind of fulfillment that I go through on a daily basis. And I feel blessed to be able to be a part of.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Andreea Parc.
And I'm Dumitru.
And this is Alive Again podcast, a podcast where attorneys and other professionals meet to discuss real life challenges and how our decisions shaped our journeys. Today we have a special guest, Jeff Grant. He is a criminal defense attorney, white collar attorney and at Grant Law, private general counsel, the founder of White Collar Support Group, and co-founder of Federal Expungement Initiative. Thank you, Jeff, so much for being here with us. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me, and welcome back, Alexa. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be back.
We really have a lot to cover today, and your work is so important. And being a former attorney myself and of a white collar crime as well, I'm a member of your support group, and I know the fantastic work that you're doing. I want you to share with our listeners a little bit about the support group and, more importantly, about the fantastic conference that is coming up that you're organizing.
Thank you for leading with all of that, so I know right where to go. So thank you for that. We do have a conference coming up. I'm just going to plug it right at the beginning so everybody knows. White Collar Conference 2025 is going to be on October 11th. That's a Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. And the registration is at whitecollarconference.com, whitecollarconference.com. We hope everybody will come if you have a white collar criminal justice issue or any criminal justice issue or family, friends, professionals, anybody. All right, now that I've done that, I'll circle back.
And I will definitely link in the description of the podcast where people can register for the conference. So the conference is online, is on Zoom, so anybody can attend. Basically, if
That's
they
right.
register, it's not in person, and literally anybody can register and attend.
Anybody can come, absolutely. So the White Collar Support Group is something that we started 10 years ago almost. And in fact, this coming Monday night will be our 484th weekly meeting on Zoom. And we have over 1,600 members. And on any given Monday night, we have people from in all stages of their white collar criminal justice journey. We have some people who come on 2 years before they expect to be indicted, for example. Sometimes they're having regulatory issues or they just know that something's wrong and they want to get support. And we have some people who come on 10 years after they've concluded their sentence and their release, but their life is just not going the way that they hoped or imagined. And they want support and they want guidance from a lot of other people. And as we say at the support group, we don't give advice. We share our experience, which is really a beautiful thing because it's all freely given. There are no dues or fees. I think the way that we started the ministry in general was basically because of my own addiction journey. I've been sober now for 23 years, and I've attended over 13,000 AA meetings. And it works for me, and it works for a lot of people I know. When I got back from prison after having committed a white collar crime, I committed SBA loan fraud and went through all the kind of usual issues that people go through. My story isn't all that interesting in terms of what my crime was or my drug addiction after a sports injury. My prison story isn't all that interesting, to be honest. I'm happy to talk about it all. But what I think is really interesting is my recovery, because it's unlike most people's. And in that, I really leaned into it heavily. After I got back from prison, I attended Union Theological Seminary for 3 years, and I earned a Master's of Divinity degree. And then I became an ordained reverend. And then we started this support group. It's been the greatest joy of my life to be able to be amongst people who are going through the same things that we've gone through, and to be able to support them and be supported by them.
Yeah.
If I may say something, because this has come up a lot in the past few podcasts, my story isn't interesting. And we had this discussion with the woman last week that's where the stigma comes in, because everybody wants to hear the fights and the arguments and the prison nitty-gritty, but nobody wants to hear the real stories, and that's where the stigma comes in. So your story is interesting and your story is worth telling, and people should listen, because these are the real stories, the not interesting ones. Not everybody got into a prison fight or whatever it may be.
Well, I will tell my story.
Please do.
I'm so glad you're back.
Thank you.
I was a New York attorney, and I was successful probably by any measure. Although I had bipolar disorder, but I didn't know that at the time. I was self-medicating for most of my adult life and most of my teen life. Once I moved my offices out of New York City and up to Westchester, things really started to take off. They took off in terms of my success, and they took off in terms also of my drug abuse, primarily because I had hurt myself in a sports injury. I ruptured my Achilles tendon playing basketball, and I went down hard. And even before I got to the hospital, I called up my doctor, my orthopedist, and I said to him, "You're not touching me unless you give me a prescription for 40 hits of Demerol." And he did. And I don't even know where it came from. I don't even know where the thought entered my mind, other than that I'm sure I was predisposed to be a drug addict. And now I had an excuse because I was in pain. I got operated on. And over the next couple of months, instead of weaning off of the prescription opioids, I found doctors who were going to be willing to prescribe to me. And for the next 10 years, I had doctors who prescribed to me, in rotation every week. And I would say I was stoned on prescription opioids for almost every day of those 10 years. And at first, it was not a problem, or at least I thought it wasn't. I mean, it was doing its job. But over a pretty short amount of time, my life started to disintegrate. I was making bad choices. My physical health suffered. My mental health suffered. My relationships suffered. I started not showing up at work. The quality of things I was doing was substandard. I was having kind of crazy flights of ideas and irrational thinking. When OxyContin came out right around 1996, then I really took off. I had no way of knowing at the time that I was one of the early Purdue Pharma OxyContin people, but it was available and I was there. By 1999 or so, my business had really deteriorated, and in order to keep it afloat, I commingled client funds with my funds. And once that happened, it was just a countdown to how long it was going to take me to get caught. In 2021, when 9/11 happened, I took it really, really hard. One, because I probably knew at that point that I was going to lose my law license at some point soon. And two, I was stoned. I was incapable of handling anything of that kind of emotional magnitude. So a couple of months after 9/11, the SBA was giving out SBA loans for companies that were adversely affected by the disaster. And my company qualified. I probably had lost half of my business. And I honestly don't know if the business I lost was because of my drug use or because of 9/11. I really don't know. But I called up the SBA and I told them my situation. And because my offices at that point were in Westchester County, which was one county north of New York City, they told me I qualified and they sent me the application. And when I received the application, I lied on it and said I had an office about a block from Ground Zero. And to this day, I have no idea why I did that. I don't even remember doing it, to be honest, but I'm sure I was just very desperate and I was clutching at anything I could to try to save my business. What's interesting to me is that it was very much like what happened in the beginning of the pandemic, where people were scrambling and desperate, and there was a lot of information that was coming out. And Andreea, Alexa, I can tell you that for almost 20 years, I've been telling my story and I've been around the country and on podcasts and things. And the least interesting part of my story was that I was guilty of SBA loan fraud. But all of a sudden during the pandemic, everybody knows what SBA loan fraud is. And I just had a 20-year head start. So what happened was in March of 2020, as soon as the government said they were going to release $1 trillion of money into the, out into the economy, I wrote an article for Entrepreneur Magazine saying I went to prison for SBA loan fraud. Here's 7 things you should know before taking government money. And it was the second most read article in Entrepreneur that year. It didn't stop a lot of people, apparently. But soon after that, in 2022, my business it became clear that I was not going to be able to save my law license. And in July of 2002, I skipped a couple of decades. In 2002, I resigned my law license and I got my last prescription for prescription opioids. And then I took them home and I took the entire vial that night and tried to kill myself. And so that's kind of the story before the turn. And thank you, Alexa, for encouraging me to talk about it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story.
I was at a meeting last week and we were talking about storytelling and that every single one of us has a story. But what's most important is the story that we tell ourselves about the story of our lives. And what's interesting and important both in your line of work now and in mine now is to share with people our side of the story, because in your journey and my journey, a lot of people can find themselves.
I think that's right. I mean, my interpretation of service is to be vulnerable enough to share my authenticity journey with other people. And hopefully what that does is give them agency to explore their own, or them feel less alone so that they have a safe space to be able to do it. And, I've been doing that for a long time, but I got to be honest, at some point, the sound of my own voice drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I am happy to share with you.
We have the same thing where it just feels like we're talking about a movie. It doesn't even feel like we're telling our own story anymore. We've said it so many times.
The thing I found, because, I've worked with well over 2,000 people who are going through white-collar criminal justice issues. I mean, far more as a minister than I have as an attorney, although many as an attorney as well. Everybody's story is somewhat revisionist. What's the real story and then what's the story that we remember? I have found over the years, because I'm 18 years out of prison now, I have found that I've been able to get back to essence pretty quickly. And all of the little things that were in the way or the resistance that I had to being able to own things and not just my story, but actually own my responsibility.
Really, yeah.
I mean, I don't blame anybody or anything for the decisions I made, but there were a lot of actors involved. And I do believe that I did the best I could at the time, given the tools I had. And unfortunately, like many people who have the kind of maladaptive behavior that leads to white collar crime, I had early childhood trauma and mental illness and drug and alcohol abuse and all of the things that I've learned are kind of classic in terms of leading up to that kind of behavior. And so that's why it gets me crazy. And prosecutors, for example, try to paint us all with a broad brush as greedy. And the answer is, well, some of us are greedy, but even the greedy people have these complicated backstories that have led them to do things that they knew that they shouldn't be doing,
Exactly.
but perhaps we're helpless to be able to do something about it.
Exactly.
I don't believe anybody does anything to do harm. I believe that everybody does what they do it the best that they could. Even got people who do violent crimes. I don't believe that they do it to do bad.
I know very few people who will actually go out of their way to hurt someone else.
Right.
I know a lot of people who will do whatever they have to do in order to gain advantage in a situation. But if the byproduct happens to be that someone else gets hurt, then in their mind, so be it. I don't personally prescribe to that, or at least I don't anymore, but I certainly understand it. I have known a few people who've gone out of their way to hurt other people. And I don't know if that's sociopathy. I'm still stunned when I see people not accepting responsibility and showing no remorse for the things they've done. I'm still surprised.
Yeah.
But, if you're with enough people, you're going to get a cross section of almost everything.
Yeah. And what is wonderful about the meetings of your support group is that every meeting starts with the serenity prayer, which for me, when I was in prison for almost 3 years, was at the base of my awakening, let's say, to realize that I don't have control over a lot of things. And literally, God saved me from myself.
Yeah, as Mandela said, even in places of limited control, there's three things that we have control over, and that's our bodies, our attitudes, and our ability to help others.
Yeah.
And I think that that's at the root of the serenity prayer. And we added the serenity prayer in the very beginning. So that's 9.5 years ago. We added it because one, it was something that carried over from Alcoholics Anonymous. But two, what we really wanted was some kind of consistency. We wanted some form of dogma where people could expect the same thing week after week, very much like church or temple or whatever. I mean, basically, when you go there, you know what to expect for the most part. And it was important to us that people understood right from the get-go that what we're presenting is a spiritual solution to material problems. And that's not that we don't discuss a lot of pragmatic issues and we don't discuss how to overcome all kinds of life's obstacles and practical issues that are going on. But the heart of it is the fact that this is a spiritual journey of love. And we take care of one another. We're charged with the responsibility of giving back freely. And everybody who comes on the support meetings knows that. Or if they didn't know it when they signed on because they were too afraid to know it, they learn pretty fast, like, oh my God, has this been here all this time, but I didn't know about it? And now I've logged on. And, just from your first time coming on, it's like, there's 40 or 50 other people in boxes. And it's like, oh my God, I finally have people to talk to. I finally have people who won't consider me to be, evil or a freak. And in truth, what I've learned through the years is that everybody has some kind of life altering experience in their life. Almost nobody is exempt. And I don't know if that's just because we live so long these days that everybody gets to live 2 or 3 different lives. But for people who come into our support group, for the most part, they've been tapped on the shoulder. Sometimes it's literally by the FBI. Sometimes it's just spiritually. They have been excommunicated from their old community, and they've entered a new community, whether they know it or not. And their suffering will continue until they get into acceptance of the fact that this is my new reality. This is reality right here, right in front of me. And I understand that everyone travels at their own speed and they accept things at different rates. But the longer it takes them to get into that acceptance, the longer they'll suffer.
And I want to mention for people that would like to attend is that there is no judgment and everybody listens and understands each other because somehow we're all in the same boat. Whereas at home or at work or in other communities, as you mentioned, we're not quite understood. But in the support group that you put together, everybody's on the same level, more or less. They understand each other and they don't put any judgment on somebody else.
There's really beautiful little things that go on that just show you what the base integrity of the group is. An example is if someone is going to prison on a specific day, what that person will do is at the Monday meeting before, they'll put their phone number in the chat. And then while they are driving to report to prison, they'll get 30 or 40 texts from people in the support group just wishing them luck or praying for them.
Well,
And
yeah.
where else does that happen? At a time when you could definitely feel like less than person or other people will other you. Imagine getting texts from people who love you and care about you in bulk, in mass. So that's the kind of life that we've chosen and the kind of fulfillment that I go through on a daily basis. And I feel blessed to be able to be a part of. And certainly, 10 years ago, I had one good idea in my life, Andreea, and I can't say I've had any good ideas since then, but I had one good idea. And the fact that it's still going and growing and leads us up to our conference, how's this for a segue? Leads us up to our conference and our Federal Expungement Initiative is just
Tell
a
us about
miracle.
that a little bit.
Well, we are going to hold our second conference. Last year was our first one, and it came off really, really well. But this year, we have a little bit of a shift in the way we're doing it because we have outside speakers who are going to be speaking to us. We expect about 300 attendees in there somewhere. Our keynotes are Jeffrey Toobin from CNN and author of the book, The Pardon, about the Nixon pardon. And of course, pardons are on everybody's mind right now in terms of what's going on in the previous administration and this administration. So Jeffrey will be talking to us all about that. And then our second keynote is Joe Bankman, who's Sam Bankman-Fried's father.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be interviewed by Brent Cassidy, who's a fellow podcaster of yours and a member of our support group.
Yes.
And Brent has in the can his interview of Joe Bankman. So we will have a live interview of Joe for about 40 minutes on the morning of October 11th. A day or two later, Brent will release his long-form interview of Joe Bankman. Joe's an incredible guy. He and his wife, Barbara Fried, are Stanford law professors whose son was prosecuted for probably the most well-known prosecution of its time, certainly a crypto prosecution, and ravaged their family, of course. So Joe's going to talk to us about what the effect was on his family and what they did then and how they got through it and what they're doing now in terms of post-judgment relief. Complicated. It's super complicated.
And not only is it complicated on its own, but then it's super public, which doesn't help anything at all.
And they are under a microscope no matter what they do. I could put on TV and somehow one of the commentators is talking about Sam or talking about Joe and what they're doing. And I can tell you, I received a phone call a few years ago from the parent of someone who was in the news cycle, white collar crime in the news cycle, a young guy. And the parent called me up and told me that they had spent a year in their home and had never come out of their home. And then finally, they decided they were going to go to the local Italian restaurant. So this is after a year of being in the home. So they go to this local Italian restaurant, which is in their town, and they're sitting in a booth and they're just trying to hide, or they're gun shy. They don't know what to do. And a friend of theirs sees them from across the restaurant because it's in the same town where they live. And so the friend walks across the restaurant to see how they're doing. And the friend says to them, how are you? We've missed you. I'm glad you're out. I heard about this group on a podcast. I think you should get in touch with them. And so the dad called me up and said, that's when we know we're doing our job right. When it seeps into the cracks that if anybody has some kind of white collar issue, that we should be your first call, because we won't steer you wrong. We have no skin in the game. We don't charge any money. We're all volunteer. We're doing this out of respect and to get well ourselves. So, that's what it is with Joe Bankman in terms of he's doing this for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I wish I would have known about you because I went through hell literally before. I didn't know I was an attorney, scared of the unknown. And having had somebody to talk to would have been amazing. And even after that, Alexa could have been part of your group because I'm sure that people talk about their kids' experiences. And what a better and more beautiful conversation than to learn from somebody's experience.
I went through it the same way you did, because when I went through it 20 years ago, there was barely an internet. I mean, there was no information at all. And so we just had to guess. When I got designated to Allenwood Low. I thought I was going to a camp. I didn't know I was going to a low security prison. And I had to go look it up. And when I looked it up, I said, this is not a camp. I was told at the time I couldn't get redesignated for a year. And I was only going to spend 13 months or 14 months away. And there was no sense trying to do anything. So I served my sentence at a low. There was no one to give me any guidance whatsoever. Nobody. And so when we started the ministry and the support group, it was basically so that nobody would ever have to go through that again. If we do our job right and we get the word out there, nobody ever has to be alone. And through the years, we've done a decent job. We can do a better job of getting the word out there. And that's why I come on podcasts like yours.
Yes, of course. So now, do you have anything to share for people that, for example, might go through something, or a family member or a child that doesn't know what's happening with their parent? What would you tell them?
The first thing I would tell them is to be honest. In my case, I had been lying for such a long time about everything. I was living a double life. And I think most people who go through these things have been going through much of their lives, or at least for a few years of their lives, looking over their shoulder. Am I going to get caught? When is the axe going to drop? And I think the sooner that we just start to be honest, and in some ways that's an unreasonable expectation. I don't think you can go from being in hiding to being honest overnight. There are a lot of people who are now years on their journey and they're still finding it hard to be honest. And I'll tell you, people call me up and they'll tell me these elaborate stories. And there's a few things I tell them. The first thing I'll tell them is, if they tell me this very, very elaborate story, I'll say to them, okay, you're a lawyer, Andreea, so I can kind of give it to you straight, right? I'll say to them, that's incredible, right? Well, incredible means not credible, right? We know the difference is great. It's hard to pull the wool over someone's eyes, okay, who has been through all of this and has been to prison and knows a hustle when they see one. I still want to get your phone calls, folks. Listen, I want you to call because I have something that you want. Maybe I can help, or someone in our group can help. Not just to hear you continue to spin a tale and not want to get well. So that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing. We've had a lot of success in our group. In fact, we have a 0% recidivism rate. And I'd love to tell you that we take credit for that. And in some ways we probably, but the reality is that people who come into the group self-select to come in the group. People who don't want to get help never make the phone call.
Yeah.
So if you want to get help and you want to become part of a community and you want to accept responsibility and become accountable, make the phone call or send the email or whatever, and then join us. But if you don't want to, and I'll tell you, far more people don't want to than do. I mean,
Unfortunately,
we know that we capture roughly 5% of the market. We know how many prosecutions there are out there. And 5% is a huge number. It's huge. But even 5%, that means 95% is out there suffering or lying to themselves. Or maybe there are some people who are just doing great, and more grace to them, right? No judgment. I mean, I would love if everybody could come home and just do great. But I just think the reality of that is,
It's about ego.
that's right. That's a hard one, especially for people who were and can be successful. But I think that it's essential to redefine what success means.
Yeah.
And by the way, I didn't make that move. All you have to do is read the Bible, and you can see how the definitions of rich and poor and all of those shifted, because people were oppressed back then and they were unable to stand up for themselves, and they needed leadership and guidance, and people still do. And in the absence of real leadership, they'll turn to false gods, they'll turn to false leaders, or they'll turn back to the maladaptive behavior that got them into trouble to begin with. And what a shame that is. But for the people who do come, not only can we help them in support, but we can lead them the greater community through the kind of initiatives that we have, like the Federal Expungement Initiative that we've just started, that if we're lucky, if everything goes well, not too far in the future, we will have a federal expungement law. And that's something we launched in the last few months. And it's taking off. For your listeners who are out there, if you've been convicted of a federal crime, it's a lifetime sentence.
Yeah.
There's no way out of the system. But there are ways out of the system in many of the states. And we're just looking to apply some of the experience and logic they use in some of the states and then apply it to the federal system.
Federal.
So
Yeah.
we put together some of the greatest minds in the country. And we'll be writing a bill and looking for congressional sponsorship pretty soon. And I will keep you advised and informed as to all of that, I promise.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. And I will link all the information into the description of the video for people to read more. And of course, come to the conference if they would like to. There would be plenty of information for everyone.
3 hours, folks. So you can do it. You can do it. And spread the word because it's for everybody. It's not just for people who are directly justice impacted. It's family, friends, lawyers, anybody interested. Again, October 11th at 9 a.m. Eastern. And it's going to be very professionally run, just like last year, and with respect and dignity and a lot of information and 3 hours. And then you can go play golf or whatever you do.
Yes, I will definitely be there. And now that we're approaching the end, it's that one question that I ask every guest, and that is, what is one activity in your life that makes you feel more alive?
It's such a great question. I've been thinking about this since you sent it to me. And I'm thinking about it holistically. Okay. Because when I went to prison, what I did was I had to learn what respect was. And I mostly had to learn respect for others. And for those of you who haven't been to prison, or hopefully you never go to prison, but if you have to go to prison, respect is everything in prison. And because if not, bad things can happen. But that making the move from respecting others to the move to respecting myself was a big move. And because mostly what I wanted to do my whole life was hurt myself, but I didn't know that. Or if I knew it, I was suppressing it. And I would say the thing that makes me feel most alive now is to have really radical respect for myself. And that's in almost all things. So, for example, I watch what I eat. I swim laps every day. I only have relationships that nourish me. I really don't do anything that I can think of overtly. That's not to say that I'm a saint, but I don't do anything unless I look at it through the lens of how is this going to help my character and increase my conscious contact with God. And my life has gotten radically better. So I would say that self-respect is a huge one. And it's probably the best answer I could give to your question.
That is wonderful.
And that's a different answer. Usually we get like walking, hiking, biking, things, which are all wonderful answers, but this is one that we haven't heard from the inside, which is a
Nice.
really beautiful answer.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
nice.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being here with us. I will definitely see you at the conference on October 11th at 9 a.m. Eastern.
Plug.
And I will link all the information to the description of the video.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and blessings to both of you and to everyone listening. I'm so pleased to be able to just talk about this, and hopefully someone got helped out there today.
Yes, of course. Thank you, our listeners. For more guests and more conversations, please subscribe and follow us. Thank you. We'll see you next week.